All right, let's talk about the 2027 mutation. So in the human design material, when it was originally received by Ra Uruhu, he was told that we are in the midst of a shift and that the chart was going to go through a significant change in the way in which it's hardwired. There's so much I have to say about this. This could be a whole nother class, a whole nother several classes, but I think it is time for us to have a review conversation about this because we haven't talked about this in a while, and I will make sure I get to your questions today. Because for us to really understand this, we really have to divorce our mindset from the idea that the chart tells you who you are. So let's start with that as a really important and powerful basic tenet. This chart, as it exists, this is not who you are. This is how you are, okay? This tells you how you experience the energy of the world, this is a map for your evolution, since that's the theme for today. And it is a map that shows you how you interact and interface with not only people and the world on the third dimensional plane, but also the quantum field. And it is an illumination of a collection of archetypes, parts of a story, and the parts of that story come from the totality of the human story. So you're living out your individual personal story, and that story contains all the parts of the human story in it. So the human story is changing. And it's not the first time that the human story has changed. That makes total sense, right? We're not who we were in the year 1000, right? Post BC, what do they call it now? AD, it used to be AD, right? Now it's something else that they call it something else. I don't remember what it is. I'm sorry. I like that it's a piece of music and how it can play can be varied. So the last time the chart went through a shift, it happened in 1781. We saw in that shift, the heart chakra split into the G and the will, the solar plexus chakra split into the spleen and the emotional solar plexus. This sets us up for another change in the chart. But we have to be really careful that when we talk about this, we don't talk about this through the lens of materialism, okay? We're not going to talk about this through the lens of materialism. A plus B does not equal C here in the way that we're looking at this. So we're really looking at this as a map of consciousness and how consciousness evolves. So if we look at the change in the chart in 1781, which gave us the will center and set us up to change the way in which we create with that split in the solar plexus chakra and what drives and motivates us. What it set us up for is to explore personal sovereignty. Personal sovereignty. And that shift in beginning to evolve the idea of personal sovereignty, that idea started changing at the end of the scientific revolution, which preceded the shift in the chart by about 100 years-ish. Okay? So in the scientific revolution, we had a bunch of people they basically say, hey, the church is crazy. They are manipulating us with suspicion, and we buy it hook, line, and sinker because we don't actually know how the world works. They also said the king is a jerk, and we shouldn't let this guy or this woman, if it was the queen, we shouldn't let these people run our lives anymore. We want to decide what we do. Right? We don't want to be victims of a monarchy anymore. That was a big surge in consciousness, by the way, at least in the Western world. We're talking about this strictly from a Western perspective. Okay? And so these heretics, and they were heretics, these scientist heretics, I mean, a lot of them got killed for having these ideas. These scientist heretics said, wait, time out. If we can figure out how the material world works, how the physical world operates, then we can't be run by suspicion anymore. We can't be manipulated by fear and suspicion anymore. And we can start to figure out how to create our own stuff. our own direction, take sovereignty, that's the word we use, right? Take sovereignty over ourselves away from the king and the queen and the monarchy. That was what the French Revolution was all about. That was what the American Revolution was all about, which preceded this change in the chart. So we had these shifts and changes in the human story that happened before the chart changed. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because when we talk about how the chart is changing, there's a mythology out there that I've encountered in my journey with human design through different perspectives and different lenses that's pretty scary. There are a lot of people that are in the human design, not a lot, but there are people in the human design community that teach about this change that's coming, this 2027 change that's coming. And they teach that it will be, and actually Ra taught it this way too, that it will be the collapse of society as we know it. And that we will, and that's not bad. That's actually probably inevitable, right? But that as a result of this collapse of society as we know it, we would be living in compounds with walls and guns and deeply unified tribes fighting for scarce resources. That was like Mad Max, right? The whole vision of Mad Max, apocalypse, all that stuff we're in love with on TV, right? Or because we don't watch TV anymore, we watch the internet. I don't have a TV and I don't watch the internet. So I'm kind of a naive in that way. Now, first of all, let's remember that Ra channeled this information. And any information that we channel is subject to the human channeling its interpretation, right? And that's okay, that's normal. We're not supposed to believe Ra, we're supposed to listen to what the voice told Ra. And then from that experience of listening to it and hearing it and feeling it and sensing it, decide for ourselves which part are we going to take as truth and which parts do we maybe need to interpret for our own selves, right? And that, I really think that sometimes it's so perfect that some of us struggle with Ra. It really is. Like, we're supposed to struggle with prophets, if you want to call them that. We're supposed to struggle with people who are bringing truth, right? Because if we just were like, yeah, bring it, and we didn't question it, I think that's way more problematic than being a blind follower. I mean, well, that's being a blind follower, right? So it's good that we grapple with Ra. Ra actually would have liked that we grappled with him in the encounters that I've had. He knew people were going to grapple with him. And his goal was never to get you to follow him, but to follow what was your truth. And he said that infinite number of times in the time that I spent with him. So in the original materials, we have this change happening in the chart. It's supposed to happen in February 2027. And this change is marked by the end of a 400-year-long era. So if you are familiar with astrology, and I am not, so if I say something wrong or I get this wrong, it's because I have no idea what a precession of the equinoxes is. I know it has something to do with the tilt of the earth. Okay, that's like as much as I know about it. You now know everything I know about it. But in astrology, there are cycles that are basically they're just cycles. We'll call them global cycles. You all figure out what they are. I'm not going to look at astrology because I know you all know more than I do, and I love that. And I would like for somebody to teach me about it. But we have these 400-year-long global cycles. We are coming to the end of a 400-year-long global cycle that was ruled by the incarnation cross of planning. Okay, and in that incarnation cross, we have the 4037, the connection between the emotional solar plexus and the will center, giving us this curriculum, if you will, for the last 400 years. Now, I personally believe that part of the curriculum for the last 400 years, as we saw the will center emerge, was for us to learn about personal sovereignty and to untangle ourselves from collective stories and agreements that kept us from seeing the value of each other. In other words, we've been healing our ancestral lineage and healing our ancestral stories so that we can emerge into this new era, if you will, completely sovereign in our being, independent of past traumas, past agreements, past stuff, right? That we can come into a new cycle of creative power without all the entanglements from the past. That's not easy work, by the way. And we're not done with this work, right? The second thing that Well, the next thing is we're moving into a new era. The new era is the incarnation is ruled by the energy of the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix, or we call it the cross of the harbinger in quantum human design, which is a time when we follow our own directive, right? It's got a lot of individuality in it, but we don't eschew the others, right? We have a tribal channel in the cross of the harbinger. We got the 59-6 and, or the 59 and the, oh my God, Jamie, my brain just went totally flat. It's the 40, it's the 3420 and the 59 and the 55, sorry, and the 55. Geez, that was a bad mistake. So we have those 4 gates in the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix. It's an era where the driver energy in this next 400 years is the gate 55. If this is like what over your head, this is going to hopefully be inspiration for you to take level 3 and level 4. Okay, so I'm trying to inspire you, not confuse you. Thank you, Jamila. So that gate 55, first of all, this is what Raj used to say, God lives in the gate 55. The gate 55 is the energy of faith, and it's on the solar plexus. And it basically says we're moving into an era where the creative driver is emotional, meaning the creative driver is alignment, not fear. And we create by virtue of our faith, our trust in the abundance, because sometimes that gate is called the gate of abundance, our trust in the abundance of the cosmos, of the universe, of source. And that when we trust, when we have faith in that abundance, when we can hold the frequency, hold the energy, that's manifesting talk, right? That we can manifest based on our capacity to work with frequencies of energy, not just move the mud with our physical being, that's the will center, right? But to rather augment our human experience by knowing how to move the energy of the world through holding frequencies, holding faith, right? That's the big picture story. The last time the chart changed, it was not cataclysmic. It was gradual. It was preceded by a scientific revolution, and then it was followed by social revolutions. It took about 100 years for it to gel before the change actually happened, and then it took another couple of 100 years for us to take everything that we learned and put it into play. We created things based in systems. We created the Industrial Revolution. We created the school system, the education, well, the healthcare system, the government system, anything that has the word system on it, that's the outcropping of that shift. And we've come to a point in time when we can't sustain those systems anymore. We've outgrown them, which is normal, right? We talk about this in level 4. And I think we talked about this a little bit in level 1, that when we outgrow our story, we go through cycles of disruption, right? We go through cycles of disruption because we have to redefine who we are. And we are in a massive cycle of disruption because we've come to the end of a system's growth. And that's what we would expect at the end of a 400-year-long cycle. So we're in this really interesting place where the cycle, we really look at when did the cycle start? The cycle actually started in the late 1800s with the recognition of quantum physics as an actual separate branch of science, right? Quantum physics was differentiated out from not material physics or mechanical physics in the late 1800s. And quantum physics presented to us a big shift in consciousness. By the way, not coincidentally, we saw a big change in art because art and science usually go hand in hand and they evolve together. And we saw at the time that quantum physics really burst onto the scene, we saw modernism, we saw surrealism, we saw all this art that was bending perception, right? Because quantum physics basically said, hold up, the material world that we've been studying doesn't behave the same on the quantum level. And what that means is that if the material world is able to be what they call quantized, measured on a quantum level, and the quantum particles don't behave the same way as regular matter does, probably the way we understand regular matter is needing to be updated too. And the world isn't exactly the way we think it is, or maybe it is the way we think it is. That's the dilemma of quantum physics, right? And we've been in this process of exploring how does expectation, how does our perspective or our perception of the quantum world and the material world influence how we create? The dilemma in quantum physics is that you can measure the building blocks of matter, quantum particles, as movement, as a wave, or as a particle? I know this because we literally just did this with my 15-year-old on Saturday. I thought my brain was going to die. The textbook was so poorly written. I was like, I should rewrite this textbook, which would be hilarious. But so quantum physicists know that you can either measure the movement of a quantum particle or the location. It can be a particle or it can be a wave. You can measure the location, but you can never measure both at the same time. And part of the reason why is that when you look at a moving wave and you have an expectation about where a quantum particle is going to be, that quantum particle stops moving and drops into manifestation based on your perception. And so that quantum world becomes very difficult to measure and assess because how it reacts and behaves is variable depending on the observer. That spawned an entire philosophy around the idea that, oh my God, our thoughts create our reality, right? And that idea really took hold in the 1920s. We saw in the 1920s the new thought movement. So how many of you are familiar with Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes and Science of Mind? Okay, that all came through in the 1920s. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the Unity Church of Consciousness. That all came out in the 1920s, same thing. The book Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, was published in the 20s, right? We started to really look at, oh, the way we see the world, our attitude, our perception, our perspective, our expectations influence how we interact with reality, right? This work of interpreting that idea has been going on for 120 plus 140 years, right? So we've been in the shift of the 2027 solar plexus mutation for 140 years. And personally, even though I think the story will reach critical mass around February 2027, which will cause the hardwiring of the human story to change, which is really what's shifting. When the chart shifts, it's our hardwiring is changing. We're refocusing on different core archetypal themes as part of our human story. But the work is not going to happen cataclysmically, and it's not going to be done. We're not going to be like, okay, March 2027, done, we've evolved, right? It's going to be probably another 120 plus years until we really start to maximize the full potential of the human story. And I really do believe when we look at it, we're on the cusp of a really beautiful renaissance, a new creative revolution. And I think it's going to be a very exciting time. But we're in a transition zone, which means we look at evolution through the lens of the chart and the circuitry that is what we call mutative circuitry. If you're in level 3, you know this is individual circuitry, right? That individual circuitry built into every channel, there's always one gate that's like, whoop, 2 steps forward, and one gate that's like, no, I don't know, 1 step back, right? And so there's a push me, pull you in the evolutionary process, which is good. Because you don't want to run willy-nilly into a mutation without like checking and making sure, hey, should I be doing this? Some of you have done that, your 3rd line profiles, right? You figured out later, not that maybe that wasn't such a great idea, right? After you, right? So mutation takes time. Evolution takes time. And evolution isn't just about mutation. Evolution doesn't solidify until we test the mutation. Right? So it's good that we have resistance to change, even though we don't like it. We need it. We need conservatism. Albeit we don't really want orthodoxy, right? Because that maybe is too extreme, but we need people to go, wait, hold up, too fast, too much, wait, stop, because that keeps us from moving forward so fast that we don't build a body of data that says, hey, if I do this thing consistently and repetitively, am I still getting the same outcome each time, right? That's what science is. Science is just statistics. It's not actually about facts. There's no such thing actually as a scientific fact. Science says you will most likely, statistics, experience this result if you do these things, and this result is so predictable that we can do these things X a number of times and still get the X probability that this thing will continue to behave in the same way. It's just about patterns. Patterns are part of the collective ideal. Patterns are collective circuitry. We have to mutate. We have to experiment with it. We have to try it. Other people have to try it. Other people have to try it consistently. And we have to try it enough times to know that, okay, it works. right? When we know it works, then it gets integrated into the mainstream. And then big chunks, critical masses of evolution happen, and eventually everybody makes it through the doorway, right? Was this what you wanted? This is way too much, right? I need to probably let this go. Anyway, the bottom line is we're changing. And we're in the midst of a big change, and it's going to be an incredible change. It's going to be really, really good. But when we go through shifts and cycles of change like this on a collective level, it can feel really chaotic. And right now, we're kind of at a crossroads. We're at the end of a growth curve that's declining. That's the end of an era, right? We've outgrown systems that don't fit anymore. And we're birthing a new cycle of growth. But we're in that crossroads between the old and the new. And when we're in that crossroads between the old and the new, if you look at systems theory, there's tension. There's tension. And I want to just say, this is not about Democrats and Republicans, for those of you who are in the United States, or any of the binary ways we position ourselves. If you really look at the Democrats and Republicans from a big enough point of view, they're pretty similar. There are terrible things about different aspects of both. And I'm not saying that I don't have an opinion, I do. And from a bigger perspective, they're still operating from within the same system. And the system itself has come to the end of its growth capacity. And it's not serving the people that it could be serving at its highest potential. And that means we need to evolve it. But that evolution can't happen cataclysmically, because that's not evolution. That's chaos. Evolution is intentional and deliberate, and it happens repeatedly over and over again. And you have to keep reworking the system, and you have to make sure that the pattern holds, and you have to get underneath and deal with the foundation of what the problem is in the first place, not the symptom. So we are going to evolve. We are absolutely 100,000% going to evolve. That is inevitable. And we will evolve towards the fulfillment of a better human story. That part is also inevitable. And there are people who teach that only 4% of us are going to evolve, and the rest of us, I don't know what's going to happen to us. I do not believe that is true at all. At all. That's not how evolution works. You don't have a group of people who are like, hey, I'm better than. It doesn't work that way. We are all one. So we all evolve, and we will all evolve. And we will fulfill the story. The question right now is, which path are we going to choose to get there? And that's why knowing yourself, knowing your heart, knowing your values, knowing your value, and being deeply concerned with not only your own value, but the value of another person, all the other people around you, the world around you. Because there's no way, I mean, if we didn't learn this during COVID, there's no way that we're all independently operating machines that aren't impacted by each other. Somebody coughed in China and wow, look what happened, right? We all got it in some way, shape, or form. We were all impacted by it. We cannot create in the world in that way anymore, as if we are isolated. We're not. And so if we evolve, when we evolve, as we are evolving, we are all evolving. The question is, are we going to take the hard road? Or are we going to take the road that is consistent and allows us to practice and experiment and deliberately and intentionally craft new patterns that serve the greater good? That is all. I'm done with my speech. If you are curious about how the chart is going to change, I have written a book about it. It's called The Quantum Human. It is available on Amazon. And I encourage you to get it so that you won't be scared by people who say something different, because it's not scary. It's definitely not scary if you stay connected to your heart, and it's going to be okay. We are going to evolve, and we are going to build a world of justice, a world of equitability, a world of peace, a world of sustainability, and a world of abundance. And we are going to wake up one day in a world where every single child that is born is going to be loved, cherished, valued, supported, nurtured, fed, educated, and celebrated for who they are. And I personally am not leaving the planet until that happens. So, okay? And you're a part of it. You wouldn't be here if you weren't.